It's not a problem of attitude, but it's a problem of belief, and it is very basic. And unless there's some change in terms of the level of belief, it's difficult for us to deal with the problem in general. So some time ago, I developed, I consider rather comprehensive notion, but it's still difficult to see the interconnectedness. First of all, is the importance for the advanced nations, the West in general, to rediscover the important ethical religious traditions of the modern West. And if you examine, or you should begin to sometimes to transform or to reshape these great traditions in reference to the earth crisis, or to the ecological crisis, meaning Judaism, Christianity, and of course Islam is part of the West. I'm sorry, all these traditions are part of the East, so Islam is also part of the monotheistic religions. So these are the three most powerful traditions, because they continue to shape the modern mindset. Christian ethics and the spirit of capitalism, and Judaism and Islam are part of the God-centered spiritual traditions. So what kind of change in terms of the mindset that occupies a great deal of attention of theologians? And at one level, it's to me very wholesome development, is to reinterpret the Genesis. And this, of course, is at the major expense of some very deep-rooted Christian beliefs. The interpretation, and this is very pervasive now, is say dominion is the wrong word. It should be stewardship. Human beings are created. Of course, there's a lot of justification for that in the Christian tradition. They're created not to have power control everywhere, but to be the steward for all these creatures, and should be responsible for the health of all these species. And of course, if you look at the Christian tradition, there are many examples. St. Francis is a good example. St. Francis talked about the relationship of the human to birds, to animals, sister bird, brother deer, and so forth. So it's a sense of interconnectedness between our life world and the world beyond. If you imagine all the monasteries, these monasteries actually practice not only frugality, but aestheticism, which is the preservation of all the resources around. So that the tradition has rich resources. And yet, some people became even more radical. One Thomas Berry, who just passed away, was considered as the leading theologian committed to the question of the earth. And change his profession from theologian to geologian. Geologian meaning that his ultimate concern is not the transcendent God. His ultimate concern is care for the earth. And that's what God wills. So you care for the earth in order to understand what the earth is all about in terms of human flourishing. In Hinduism, and Hinduism is very peaceful and very hospitable to the environment. The Hindu idea of the 4 stages of being human. You begin with an apprentice. You become a householder. You become a forest dweller, because the spirit of renouncement, eventually you become ascetic. So the consumption of resources in terms of this life history is extremely limited. The highest manifestation of human spiritual accomplishment It's like your Atman, which is true self, then merges with the Brahman, the cosmic self. And it's like a drop of water that falls into the ocean or falls into the river, then dissolved. And some people say, well, what happened to our individuality? What happened to transmigration or the immortality of the soul? The Hindus' response is really quite fascinating. If you consider the individual as forces that shape water into a drop, unless they're forces, the water will not be a drop. Then you will put a lot of emphasis on these forces rather than the Atman, who is the water, but only is a drop. Then once the water hits the ocean or hits the river, all these forces that shape the water into a drop disappear. And that Atman, that true self, re-emerges with the cosmic order. Now that vision is now very, very widely accepted, not just in India. It's ecologically extremely sound. This notion about the human in the spiritual journey is eventually to rediscover the inner self, rather than trying to use all the resources for human egoistic satisfaction. That's true with Buddhism. And so in addition to the great